I just finished my first experience on the Ducati Hypermotard 698 Mono RVE. And I have to say, never have I had a vehicle whipsaw my opinion so radically in a matter of 2 hours and maybe 40 miles. Before I get into the specifics of this kind of motorcycle, I need to say that I'm new to this kind of bike. I've been riding motorcycles for over 40 years, but I've never ridden anything like this. So if you're looking for expert opinion on all the specific subtleties and capabilities of this bike, you might want to go to another review. But if you're looking for impressions to this new unconventional kind of motorcycle from someone who's never ridden anything like it before, you're in the right place. Let's get into the basics first. The Ducati Hypermotard 698 Mono comes in two versions, the base model or the more expensive RVE like you see here. The base model is a solid red color for $13,000 and this RVE version is $14,500. What you get for the extra money is not only Ducati's trademark quick shifter that allows you to shift without using the clutch once you're rolling, but also this more dramatic paint scheme, including these rather stylish and cool 17-inch wheels with black and red contrast. The mono in the name Super Mono comes from the single-cylinder engine that is 659 cc's and essentially half of Ducati's long-standing 90-degree V-twin. In this form, it makes 77.5 horsepower and it can rev to over 10,000 RPM. That makes it one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful single available in the world right now. And this is the first time Ducati's offered a single in over 50 years on a production street bike. That single-cylinder engine is paired with a 6-speed transmission and the bike rides on 17-inch wheels wearing Diablo Rosso 4 tires. The bike weighs 333 pounds with an empty fuel tank, and the fuel tank is only 3 gallons, so it's really about 350 pounds when it's fully gassed up. If 77.5 horsepower pushing 350 pounds around sounds like a great power to weight ratio, it is. I weigh about 200 pounds fully geared up, so it's more like 550 pounds, but that's still a great power to weight ratio, and trust me, the engine moves me and this bike around with ease. Honestly, after the first 15 minutes, I almost turned around and went home. The bike's got a very hyperactive nature, and it makes it tricky to control everything from the throttle, which is really responsive, almost overly responsive, even in street mode, to the seat height that makes it tricky to come to a stop and put your feet on the ground, even when you're 6 feet tall with a 32-inch inseam. The bike's seat height is 35.6 inches, which is really high. Thankfully, it's also a pretty narrow bike, and I figured out how to position myself and get confident when I had to come to a stop and hope that the thing wouldn't tip over on me. Thankfully, I stuck with it, got through the rather steep learning curve over the first 15 to 20 minutes, and started to incorporate things like the quick shifter and the bike's willingness to quickly turn in and lean over. My confidence level slowly grew, and I eventually dove into the rather elaborate settings system and went and changed it from street to sport setting for the driving mode. There's also an urban and a wet setting if you want to quiet things down and make it a little more manageable. Then I went into wheelie control and dialed it from its default 3 setting down to 1. There's also a 0 setting where there's no limitation on what you want to do doing wheelies. I have never done wheelies on a motorcycle before. I've never even really tried. They've always fascinated but also scared me. I saw so many images of this bike doing one-wheeled ballet all over the internet that I thought, all right, I'll give this a try. There is a control system. How bad could it be? And I started to actually play with the wheelies on this bike, and it's really interesting because the engine makes a lot of power, but it doesn't really come in until the mid-range, and it can rev to over 10,000 RPM, of course. So I had to get confident in hammering the throttle pretty hard at a low speed in first gear, and slowly but surely the wheels started coming up. And let me tell you, for all the wheelie virgins out there, just like flying an airplane, the takeoff is much easier than the landing. What you really want to be careful of is that once that wheel comes up, your instinct is to get it back down on the ground, and if you drop the throttle and even hit the brakes, you'll slam it down. I never hit the brakes, but I did drop throttle every time pretty much as I got nervous about the wheel getting so high, and I slowly learned to moderate the roll off of the throttle and gently set the wheel back down. It was really fun, also terrifying, but still fun, and I highly recommend it if you are trying to learn how to do wheelies. That something like this very light and very responsive bike with that throttle that'll just lift the front end when you want to, it's a great bike to learn wheelies on. Take it from someone who knows. Beyond wheelie control, there is a wide range of settings that you can play with on this motorcycle. If you go into the electronic system, you can adjust everything from throttle response to anti-lock braking to traction control on top of the wheelie control I already mentioned. And beyond the electronic settings, you can also independently adjust the front and rear suspensions manually for preload, compression, and rebound damping. That's a lot of controls for this bike and a lot of features to play with, far more than I could get through during my press loan. But I would enjoy the opportunity to slowly decode each one of those and play with them and really figure out how I best synchronize with each of those settings. In short, there's a lot to love about the Ducati Hypermotard 698 mono. But there are some downsides too. As mentioned, it only holds 3 gallons of gas, and I think you're lucky to get maybe 100 miles on a tank before you're going to have to stop and fill up. It's got that high seat height, so you really have to be comfortable figuring out how to balance the bike at low speeds, especially if you have a shorter inseam than I do. And I don't know how comfortable this seat's going to be. I mean, it's a pretty basic seat, so if you're trying to go for a longer ride, that might wear you out a little bit. Although I'll tell you, I had it at highway speeds for a few short stints and it was fine. The flip side of those concerns is that when I was finally ready to come home, I was getting close to my house and I couldn't make the final turn on my street. I had to have more and was out for another half an hour riding it around locally. That really speaks to the bike's fun nature and how enjoyable the bike can be, especially if you're like me and you're just slowly decoding how it works and figuring things out on it. If I was a younger adrenaline thrill seeker, I would be all over this thing. I'm too old and it's probably too late for me to enjoy a bike like this to its maximum capacity, but I have to say, for a few brief moments, it was fun to pretend that I was younger, thrill-seeking Carl Brower and enjoying that balance of terror and excitement while I was doing things like wheeling the motorcycle down the road. If you're looking for a very high thrill bike and you're ready to dive into that adrenaline chasing mode, I can't imagine a bike that would be any more fun than this one right here.